What if the person you trained to replace you ended up earning more than you? It sounds like something that only happens in bitter office gossip, the kind whispered around vending machines or muted chat threads. But for me, it wasn't gossip. It was a Tuesday morning. The new guy, fresh out of grad school, sharp suit, confident smile, had just joined the company. My boss asked me to show him the ropes. I didn't mind. I'd been in the department for 5 years. Training newcomers was part of my routine, a small reminder that I knew the system better than anyone. But that week, something changed. There was a tension in the air I couldn't define. Every question he asked felt less like curiosity and more like assessment. And every time I explained something, I caught my boss watching, not with pride, but calculation. I didn't realize it yet, but I wasn't training a colleague. I was building my replacement. And when I found out how much he was earning, how much more he was earning, I didn't get angry. I got quiet. Because I finally understood what kind of game I'd been playing all along. My name's Ethan Ward. 33 years old. Mid-level analyst in a mid-sized firm. The kind of place where ambition dies slowly, under fluorescent lights and polite smiles. Every morning I arrived at 8:45 sharp. Not because anyone cared, but because I did. It was my small rebellion, professionalism in a place that rewarded visibility more than value. My desk sat near the glass wall, where the city shimmered beyond my reach. I'd stare at it sometimes, that skyline, the reminder of how close I was to success, yet how far it always stayed. I'd been in the same role for nearly 5 years. The work was predictable: spreadsheets, reports, forecasting models. I could do it blindfolded. My boss, Raymond, liked to call me reliable. He said it like a compliment, but it always sounded like a eulogy. Still, I believed in the quiet dignity of consistency. The belief that if you stay loyal, work hard, and wait your turn, the system will notice. That belief kept me anchored. Then, one Monday morning, Raymond called me in. He smiled, that managerial smile that hides both praise and strategy. "Ethan," he said, "I need you to train someone. We're expanding the department. You'll like him, young, smart, eager to learn. Name's Daniel." Daniel walked in a moment later, tailored suit, confident posture, a handshake that lingered just a second too long. He was everything I used to be, before the years sanded me down. At first, I didn't think much of it. Training new hires was common. But Raymond's tone, something about it felt off. Too formal. Too polite. That week, Daniel's desk was placed right next to mine. He asked questions nonstop, about systems, processes, shortcuts, everything. He learned fast. Too fast. By the end of the first week, he was finishing tasks I used to handle alone. By the end of the second, Raymond was forwarding Daniel's work to senior management, seeing me only as a courtesy. The office had shifted. Quietly. Subtly. And though I didn't want to admit it, I felt it, the slow displacement, like the floor beneath me was rearranging itself. One night, as I stayed late finishing reports Daniel was supposed to help with, I saw something strange. Through the reflection of the glass wall, I caught a glimpse of Raymond's office. He and Daniel were talking, laughing, and then a handshake. The next morning, Daniel showed up in a new suit. He looked lighter, confident in a way that made me uneasy. I tried to ignore it, but deep down, something inside me whispered, "This isn't training anymore. This is succession." It happened on a Friday. The kind of quiet afternoon where time feels slow and suspicious. Raymond called me into his office again. Same polite smile. Same calm tone. But this time, Daniel was already sitting there, across the table, relaxed, a coffee cup in hand. "Ethan," Raymond began, "I want to thank you for helping Daniel get up to speed. You've done a fantastic job mentoring him." I nodded, though something about the word mentoring felt wrong. Like I'd been volunteering for a job I didn't apply for. Then Raymond continued. "As part of our new structure, Daniel will be taking on some of your client accounts. You'll still oversee the transition, of course." "Transition?" I repeated. He smiled, that managerial half-smile that means you're not supposed to question this. "It's temporary," he said. "We just want to give him a chance to lead a few projects." I glanced at Daniel. He didn't look at me. He just stared at his cup, hiding a faint grin. Something in me cracked, quietly. The kind of fracture you don't hear, but you feel. That weekend, I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed every subtle shift over the past month. The jokes, the handshakes, the meetings I was no longer invited to. It all aligned. By Monday morning, I knew something was off. Daniel was now copied on every email I sent. He started sitting in my meetings, not beside me, but in front of me, facing the clients directly. And then it happened. An email pinged. It wasn't meant for me. It was from H, sent to Raymond with Daniel CC'd. But somehow, I'd been accidentally included. It contained a spreadsheet, salary adjustments for the quarter. And there it was. Daniel Carter, Senior Analyst, $9,400 per month. Ethan Ward, Analyst, $4,800 per month. I froze. My chest tightened. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't even anger at first. It was disbelief, pure, raw disbelief that the company I'd bled years into thought that's what I was worth. Daniel was earning twice my salary. For a role I was teaching him to do. I reread the numbers again and again, thinking maybe it was a mistake. But no, my name was there. My title. My pay. Everything correct, except the morality of it. That evening, I stayed in the office long after everyone left. The glow of the monitor reflected on my face as I stared at Daniel's profile in the HR system, younger, newer, and apparently more valuable. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't an accident. This was design. They weren't rewarding loyalty anymore. They were replacing it. And the cruelest part? They'd made me the architect of my own replacement. For the first few days after discovering Daniel's salary, I told myself stories, comforting lies dressed as logic. Maybe it was a sign that I'd trained him well. Maybe management saw potential in him that I'd already outgrown. Maybe this was just how the world worked. That's what I kept whispering to myself. Because the truth, that I was disposable, was too heavy to carry. I still showed up on time, smiled in meetings, explained reports, and double-checked Daniel's presentations before they reached Raymond's desk. He'd thank me politely. It started small. The kind of change you don't notice at first, like a draft under the office door. Daniel began skipping the part where he asked for my feedback. He'd just send things directly to Raymond now. And Raymond? He'd nod, smile, and tell him, "Good work, son." Son. He never called me that. Soon, people in the office started treating Daniel differently. He was invited to client dinners I used to attend. He was added to group chats that excluded me. Even the interns started calling him, sir. And every time I looked up from my desk, I could see him, sitting in the very same seat I once had. Same view. Same workload. Different paycheck. But the real crack came one Friday evening. I was finishing up the quarterly report when I overheard them in the break room. Daniel and Raymond laugh. Not just the polite office laugh, but the laugh, the one people reserve for equals. Raymond said, "You're my best investment this year. Keep it up." And Daniel replied, "Couldn't have done it without Ethan." Then they clinked glasses. And I swear, the sound of that toast hit harder than any insult could. That night, I sat alone at my desk long after everyone left. The lights dimmed automatically at 8 p.m., and I just sat there, surrounded by the hum of the air conditioner and the blinking of the router light. I opened my email draft folder, the one where I kept every unsent resignation letter. The first was written a year ago. The last one was written last week. For months, I told myself that loyalty mattered, that the company would see. But the truth was, loyalty was invisible here. The only thing anyone saw was the number next to your name. And for the first time, I realized, maybe the reason they paid Daniel more wasn't because he was better, it was because they could get away with paying me less. That thought didn't just sting. It rearranged something inside me, something fundamental. I wasn't angry anymore. I was awake. You'd think betrayal hits you like lightning. Fast, loud, impossible to ignore. But it doesn't. It seeps in. Quietly. For weeks after that night, I wasn't the same. I wasn't angry in the usual sense, not shouting, not breaking things. It was worse. I felt numb. Every morning, I'd sit in my car outside the office, staring at the glass building that had once felt like mine. The same glass I'd polished with my hard work, my loyalty, my years, now reflected back a stranger who looked tired. There's a particular kind of pain in realizing your worth isn't measured by what you give, but by what they can take from you without losing you. That's the psychology of underpayment. They don't need to chain you to the desk, they just make you believe walking away is failure. So I stayed. And every day, Daniel's confidence grew while mine eroded in silence. He spoke louder in meetings. I spoke less. He got applause, I got polite nods. And yet, every time he presented a project, I could hear my own ideas echoing in his words, the ones I'd taught him. But that's what broke me the most. Not that he earned more. Not even that he took my place. It was that I taught him how. I had trained my own replacement, shaped him, mentored him, built him. And now I was watching him live the life that I'd spent years trying to reach. Do you know what happens when that realization finally lands? You stop blaming them. You start blaming yourself. I blamed myself for being too patient, too kind, too afraid to ask, what am I worth? I realized I'd confused humility with submission. And that's the tragedy of so many workers. We wear our endurance like a badge, while the world quietly moves our finish line further away. There's a line I read once. The system doesn't exploit the weak. It exploits the obedient. And that line stuck with me. Because I wasn't weak. I was obedient. I followed every rule, every order, every deadline. But obedience doesn't earn respect. It breeds expectation. That night, I went home and opened Daniel's LinkedIn. His title read, Senior Analyst, Promoted. And right under it a post. Grateful to my mentor, Ethan Cole, for believing in me. My name. Right there. Immortalized beneath his success. And I just sat there, staring at that sentence. It felt like an obituary for everything I had been. That's when it hit me. I had spent years teaching others how to climb, while never noticing that I'd stopped climbing myself. That was the night I decided. I'd never let anyone decide my worth for me again. What happened to me wasn't just personal, it was a pattern. A quiet epidemic running through offices everywhere. Once I started paying attention, I saw it everywhere. People like me, the builders, the mentors, the ones who make the machine run smoothly, being quietly replaced, underpaid, or forgotten. And who replaced them? Cheaper, younger versions, molded from their own teachings. We've built a culture that glorifies efficiency but despises loyalty. Companies no longer want experience, they want scalability. They'll smile while you train the next generation, and then hand you a severance letter wrapped in budget adjustments. I began noticing something else, too. The coffee breaks got quieter. People didn't talk about raises anymore, they talked about survival. About whether they could keep their jobs after the next performance review. Everyone was scared, but no one said it out loud. The office had turned into a chessboard, and we were all pawns pretending to be knights. Even managers were trapped in the same illusion, pressured from above to cut costs, while smiling from below to keep morale high. They were middlemen in a system built on silence. I remember overhearing a conversation in the break room one morning. A junior employee whispered, "Do you think they'll ever promote you?" And her friend replied, "Not unless my mentor quits first." That line cut deep, not because it was cruel, but because it was true. The workplace had become a zero-sum game. Growth wasn't about skill anymore, it was about timing. Someone had to fall for another to rise. And as I watched Daniel walk the same hallways, shaking hands with the same executives who once overlooked me, I saw something even darker. He wasn't the villain. He was just the next link in the chain. He didn't steal my position. He inherited it, from a system that rewards self-promotion over silent dedication. That's when I began to understand, the real problem wasn't Daniel. It wasn't even Raymond. It was the illusion that the workplace was fair. We've been sold the story that if you work hard, stay loyal, and play by the rules, the system will reward you. But the truth? The system doesn't reward effort. It rewards visibility. Those who shout louder, rise faster. Those who serve quietly, fade slower. And by the time they realize it, it's already too late. The irony? Most of us train our replacements not out of kindness, but out of hope. Hope that someone will notice our mentorship, our patience, our teamwork. But hope, in this economy, has become the new form of control. The system doesn't need to punish rebellion anymore. It just needs to reward obedience selectively, enough to keep the rest waiting. So I watched the company thrive while I faded from memory. But deep down, something was changing in me. The silence that once felt like defeat was slowly turning into understanding. And that understanding was sharper than any revenge could ever be. Because now, I could see it clearly, this wasn't a story about a man being replaced. It was a story about a system that replaced gratitude with metrics, and humans with roles. That's when I decided, if I was going to be replaced, it wouldn't be by another man. It would be by the version of myself that stopped waiting for permission. There's something haunting about training the person who will one day replace you. It's not just about losing a job, it's about watching your own effort become the reason you're no longer needed. I kept thinking about that, how Daniel's confidence was built on the lessons I taught him. My own words, my strategies, my habits, all reflected back at me like a cruel mirror. But underneath the bitterness, I realized something deeper. The real betrayal wasn't between me and Daniel. It was between me and my belief system. I was raised to think loyalty meant security. That if you stayed long enough, proved your worth, the system would recognize you. But the modern workplace isn't a family, it's an economy of attention. And attention doesn't flow to those who serve silently. We've built a world where being indispensable means being replaceable the moment you stop proving it. Where your value isn't measured by what you've built, but by what you're currently building, right now, this quarter, this metric. And maybe that's why it hurts so much when you're left behind. Because you realize you weren't being rewarded for who you were being rented. That thought broke something in me. Because I had mistaken devotion for purpose. And in return, the company mistook my silence for contentment. The truth beneath it all was this: workplaces don't just measure productivity. They measure perception. And perception, like power, is rarely fair. Daniel didn't earn more because he was smarter. He earned more because he looked like progress. He represented the illusion of freshness, innovation, and change. The very things companies crave, even when they cost them experience. I started asking myself, if I could go back, would I still train him? Would I still share everything I knew, every shortcut, every lesson I bled for? And the answer surprised me. Because what I gave him wasn't just skill, it was integrity. Even if the system rewarded him more, I couldn't let it change who I was. The day I start hoarding knowledge out of fear is the day I stop growing. And that's how the system wins, when it turns mentors into rivals and teachers into ghosts. So I made peace with it. Not because it was fair, but because I finally saw the truth clearly. The system may decide my salary, but only I decide my worth. And as I walked out of that building for the last time, I wasn't leaving behind a job. I was leaving behind the illusion that I ever needed permission to be valuable. A few months after I left, I got a message. From Daniel. He wrote, "I finally understand what you meant about the deadlines. It's insane here. They expect me to fix things I didn't even break. You made it look easy." For a second, I almost laughed. The same Daniel who once bragged about his salary now sounded exhausted. Trapped in the very machine that once rewarded him. Then he said something that froze me. "They've hired a new intern. I'm supposed to train him." Funny, right? And in that moment, I saw the full circle, the same story replaying through someone else's life. The same illusion of progress. The same quiet betrayal. It wasn't about me anymore. It was about a system that runs on repetition, feeding one dream while draining another. A loop of ambition, envy, and exhaustion. An ecosystem built not on fairness, but on forgetfulness. I realized the real revenge wasn't in watching Daniel struggle. It was in stepping out of that loop, before it consumed me too. I started my own small consulting firm. At first, it was just me, a desk, and a laptop. But every client I helped, every young employee I mentored, reminded me of something I'd forgotten, that power isn't given, it's built. And when one of my clients asked what inspired me to start my business, I just smiled and said, once, I trained a man who earned more than me. And it was the best lesson life ever paid for. Fade out. The office lights dim. The same hum of fluorescent bulbs from the start of the story returns, but softer now. Because the sound isn't oppressive anymore. It's peaceful. The man who once trained his replacement ended up replacing his entire definition of success. Sometimes the paycheck isn't the reward, it's the leash. And walking away from it is the first time you actually get paid in freedom.